Hello. We're moving forward with problem solving and programming techniques. We are going to be in chapter 2 today, and we're going to be talking about flow control. So, right now, we've already talked about how to get Python installed on your computer. We've talked about how to get a development environment set up with Visual Studio Code, and we've talked about variables and data types and how to work with those with operators. So now we're going to try to control the flow of our program, and we're going to get some special tools to do that. The first thing that we're going to get is Boolean values. This is going to introduce us to a new data type that we can use. We're going to have comparison operators, Boolean operators. Remember, operators are just symbols that do things for us or communicate to the computer that we want to do things. And then we're going to have if statements, else statements, and else. So the first thing we need to talk about is a Boolean, and it's just a data type that means true or false. It's a weird name. Just kind of get used to it because that's what they're called all through computer science. But it's just true or false. There are some people that try to do it true, false, or I don't have an answer. But Python doesn't play that. You got two options. It's a yes or no question. And that's really the best approach to this stuff because these are going to help us be able to make decisions inside of our code. So the first thing that we get is comparison operators. And a lot of these should look familiar. If we ignore that double equals at top and the not equals, we start getting into things that we saw in middle school math, high school math. So we have less than. And I was taught, think Pac-Man. Pac-Man wants to eat the most points. So the wider part is going to face what is larger. So also the name less than. So what's on the left is less than what's on the right. Same thing with greater than. What's on the left is greater than what's on the right. And then we have less than or equal or greater than or equal. And that means if it meets the less than or the greater than, great. But also, if it's equal, we'll take that as well. Now, if you remember from the last video, we talked about one equal sign was how we assign some data into a variable. So when we have two equal signs, that's asking a question. We're asking, is the thing on the left the same as the thing on the right? And if the thing on the left is the same as the thing on the right, then they are equal. So that's true. At the same time, if I ask the question, is the thing on the left not equal to the thing on the right? Well, once again, I'm asking a yes or no question, or in Python, a true or false question. So this is what we would see for some of these things. So the first one you see, I have the string me, M-E, and it's between single quotes. And then I have the double equal sign to ask the question, are these two things equal? And even though the left side is single quotes and the right side is double quotes, it's still just the two characters, M and E, in that order. So they are the same. So yes, they are equal. So we will reply true. At the same time, not equal. Well, 7 and 7 are equal. So if I had put it in the line above, that would have been true. But since I'm asking, are they not equal? Well, in that case, it's false. They are not equal. And this gets real interesting because now I'm putting two knots together. So you got to be careful how you word it. But basically, 7 and 7 are the same. So it is false whenever I ask, are they not equal? Now, 4 is less than 5. Well, yes, that's true. Is 5 greater than 5? No, they're the same. So that's false. Is 6 less than or equal to 5? No, 6 is not less than 5. It's not equal to 5. So that would be false. And then finally, we have the greater than or equal. But 5 and 5 are the same. So yes, this is true. So now we can start adding in Boolean operators because I can make these single comparisons all day, but sometimes I need something a little more complicated. So we have three operators called and, or, and not. And we think about these basically like we would a sentence. So if I told my son, I need you to go clean your room and mow the yard. Well, he has to do both of them in order to meet my request. On the other side, if I said, "Hey, go clean your room or mow the yard," I don't care which one he does, but he's got to do one. So that's the difference between and or. And you have to take care of all of it, or you just got to take care of one. And we can see it here. So for and, if I have true and true, so for example, my son cleaned his room and he took care of the yard, then he's good to go. On the other hand, if he cleaned his room and he didn't take care of the yard, then he's in trouble, right? Now, if I'm walking through the house and I see that the yard's not mowed, I don't have to go look at his room, know he's already in trouble. So in the same way, if I had a false on the front of this and then true, I don't have to look because I already know it's false. So with or, he has to not mow the yard and not take care of his room to get in trouble. So false or false is going to give me false, but they have to be together. Now, on the other hand, if he takes care of his room, then he's good to go if it's mow the yard or clean your room. Same thing if I were walking through and I look in the front yard and I see he's already mowed the yard, I don't have to go check his room because he's already good to go. And then we have not. And not, it just kind of, it gives me the opposite. So if it was true, well, not true, it suddenly becomes false. And remember, these are, we're still kind of asking a question here. So if it's not true, then it's false. If it's not false, then it's true. So it's kind of odd. Some developers will end up stacking 3 or 4 nots in front of each other. Don't do that. That's bad practice. It's hard to read. Remember, we want to make our lives easy because the person that is trying to figure our stuff out later could be us, and we don't want to set ourselves up. So I try to avoid not as much as possible. I definitely try to avoid putting 2 knots together or more. But that's and, or, and not. This is one of those things you're going to get used to it with practice, and you're going to practice a lot with the and or. So now that we have ways to make comparisons and figure out what's true and false, and we can do some more complicated stuff with and or, we can start talking about the if statement. If I told my son, if you clean your room and if you take care of the yard, then we'll go play ball with your friends. We understand if he takes care of it, then he's going to go play ball with his friends. And if not, then he's not going to go play ball with his friends. So in the same way, Python has an if statement. And if something is true, then we're going to do what falls under it. So looking at this code, I have a variable named num, and I put a 3 in it. That's what that single equal sign does. And then I ask the question, is num less than 5? Well, num is 3, and 3 is less than 5. So that's true. So in this case, I would do everything that's indented under if. So this is an important thing that Python does. Python looks at what we call white space. So tabs over in this case, or spaces between lines, things like that. There's not so much, but really these tabs are the biggest thing that it looks at, and we call it a block of code. So I can put more than one line down here, and as long as it's all indented to the same level, it will all fall under this if statement's control. So if num is less than 5, then that would be true. So I would do everything underneath it. So in this case, this would print my number is less than 5. But what happens if it's not less than 5? Previously, it would have just skipped over it and done nothing. But now I have an else. You know, you're going to take care of this. If you don't, else. So in the same way, now I have num equals 5. So that's the number that's in my variable. If num or 5 is less than 5, well, that's not true because 5 is equal to 5. It's not less than 5. So now I go to my else statement. I don't print my number is less than 5. I skip over that piece because it's indented over and it's controlled by that if statement. So I skip that and I go to else and I take care of what's inside that block of code. So in this case, I would print my number is not less than 5 because it's not. So what happens whenever I need more than one comparison? So for example, here, my num is still 5, and num is still not less than 5. So my if statement is still not true, but my number isn't greater than 5 like my else statement says. I need a way that I can say that it is exactly equal. So I also have a comparison that is called elif. So elif is short for else if. So my first if was false. So that one doesn't work. So I skipped over the print my number is less than 5. Then I test my next one. So elif num equals 5. Well, that's true. So in this case, I print my number is 5. Now, if that one was false as well, then I would still continue on to my else. And the nice thing about elif is I can use more than one. So I could test all kinds of things. I could have my first if statement, and then I can have 5 or 6 elifs underneath it if I want, which is nice if I have a lot of options that I could be comparing. And then at the end, my else becomes a catch-all. And then on top of that, we can put if statements inside of if statements. And we call this a nested if. So in this case, I have my num is 10, and I'm saying if num is greater than 5, which it is greater than 5, then I'm going to look at my next if statement that is in the block of code underneath my first comparison. And then I ask if num is less than 15, but 10 is less than 15. So I'm going to print my number is between 5 and 15. So we can put if statements inside of if statements. And of course, we can nest these however many times we want. It does get complicated whenever you have a lot of these nested inside each other. So it's not always the best practice, but we can do this and it is useful. So we've talked about Boolean values, comparison operators, so our greater than, less than, equal to. We talked about Boolean operators, which are our and or not. And then we talked about if statements, and then else. And then we talked about elif, which is the same as else if. And we got a little bit extra. We talked about some nested if. So just like last time, I want you to look at the book. I want you to look at the programming videos they're provided. And I want you to get in there and try this stuff in code because that's how we're going to learn.